This is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
Yeah, a lot of familiar faces, a lot of guys back, so I think that's huge for us just to, be familiar with everyone and have that team feel right off the bat. So, like I said, I think, we're battling hard, we're skating up and down the ice, so I think it's been a good first week of camp.
Oh, come on. We're battling hard. I love it. I love these things. Big game for us tonight. Yeah,
Are you excited to be back in the arena? Benchmark International Arena.
I'm excited to see everybody.
Yeah.
In terms of the game, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you and I have been through these enough where I think particularly a team that is pretty accomplished coming back. I mean, other years are more interesting when it comes to preseason than others. I think probably like a lot of fans, you want to see some guys you haven't heard of. You want to see some prospects.
Yeah.
But you know what Cirelli can do. You know what Kucherov can do. Maybe we've got a little more news on the power play partner, and we can talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Vasi update, we can talk about that. I mean,
yeah,
so
we have some stuff to fill an hour.
Yeah,
for
I mean, this
sure.
is interesting. But like in terms of the game, preseason game number 3 against Carolina again, like okay, it is what it is.
So on the scale of like totally chill at one end and full on panic attack at the other, where were the majority of Lightning fans on this Vasilevsky situation prior to John Cooper's update yesterday, and where are they post John Cooper update, where Coop gave an update and said Vasilevsky will be back at practice on Monday? So they're basically giving him the first week plus off of training camp, and the expectation is that he's going to get into certainly one of the final 3 preseason games.
So did John Cooper take the Florida Panther approach with Andre Vasilevsky and basically just say, come back that last week of preseason. You've played a lot of hockey. If you've got some aches and pains, I mean, honestly, just come back the last game, maybe even in preseason, and you'll be fine.
I don't mean to make light of it, because I think what happened 2 years ago was still very much in the minds of Lightning fans that were concerned, that were farther along on that sliding scale toward the panic end. And look, it's possible that whatever was bothering him, if that's the right way of putting it, who knows if a week plus is enough. All we can do is go by what the team is saying. And 2 years ago, the team came out and said, Andre Vasilevsky has to have a surgery. Like, there was never any indication that this was anything more than a week or a week plus, and that's exactly, what it was. Now,
it's a good point.
Let's see how he looks when he gets back into practice, and let's see how he looks in the one preseason game that he gets into. But hopefully for Lightning fans, if they were worried about this or losing sleep over this, hopefully this takes some of the pressure out of the balloon and
I think
they can just kind of settle back in. And also, we mentioned Point and Holmberg yesterday, and Coop kind of shrugged that off. In fact, Braden Point's playing tonight. So
there you go. So
there you go.
Listen, just to put a bow on the Vasi stuff, I understand it. Vasi is shaky. Vasi is injured. Vasi isn't ready to go. You reevaluate things based off of the information that's provided to you. And if something's happening to one of your best players, and look, Vasi is who he is. Whether some people think his play has declined or other people think he's still the best goaltender in the league, he's still a top 5 goaltender in the league. And if there's anything there that jeopardizes that stature to a degree, it's going to affect the team. It might not be in the regular season, but it could be in the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure a guy like that is okay and ready to go. So another reason why you have to be tempered in your emotions when it comes to the information that's provided to you, but also, how are you responding to the team handling that situation? Is it early in the season? We've often said this before. If you're going to deal with an injury to a player of great prominence, you want it to happen early on if you can.
Yeah, and who knows if, honestly, Greg, who knows if this was even an injury?
It might not have
been. Maybe it just
it might not have been
player maintenance.
And that's fine. And that's why I think sometimes you have to give things in today's news cycle almost like 48 hours before you can really digest news that's given to you, because it can change. And I think that's all I think that's normal for fans to react that way, and I think you're right, because we're not that far removed from when he had a surgery.
Yeah.
And so, but it's not that.
No.
And so you dodge a bullet.
The beginning part was similar,
That's fine.
in that he came out for the start of training camp and then was gone and left the ice and wasn't seen on the ice. But anyway, as far as tonight's game goes, Carolina is bringing a team without many what we would call, they're not bringing their top end NHL guys. Now they're bringing some NHL guys. Jesperi Kotkaniemi is in the lineup tonight. Alexander Nikishin, who played in the first game between the teams, he's going to be in the NHL this year. He is on the trip. But I'm looking at the rest of their lineup, and it's really a lot of bubble guys or AHL guys, which, I mean, the opposite was kind of the case for the Lightning when they played Nashville. In fact, the Lightning are not using as NHL heavy a lineup as Nashville did. So I'm just telling you, if you're going to the game tonight, you're watching the game, it's going to be on the Spot 66. Good luck to Dave Randorf and Brian Engblom and the crew, Paul Kennedy, for a smooth send-off with their new television partner. The final 5 preseason games will be televised. But you're going to probably be hearing some names like, well, where's Aho? There is a Slavin in, but it's Josiah Slavin. It's not Jacob Slavin. Right. So that's the sort of lineup we're seeing from Carolina. For the Lightning, we are seeing Point, Kucherov, and Gensel. We're seeing Hedman and Moser. Moser played in the first game, but I'm putting Moser in there because I think my expectation would be that Hedman and Moser will be paired together and that the top line will be a unit. Bjorkstrand is playing tonight. Other guys that have been in games but are getting another game. Dylan Duke is in the lineup tonight. Wojtek Stachowiak is in the lineup tonight. I actually have the full list here. Nick Abruzzese, who played in the Nashville game, is in. We're going to get our first look at Max Crozier. Jack Finley is back in the lineup tonight, as is Ethan Gauthier. Gergenson's played in the Nashville game. He's in. Groshev's back on defense. The goalies are Johansson and Mennigan. They were the goalie tandem when the Lightning played at Carolina, but Johansson got the whole game. It sounds like Mennigan may get a period tonight, so that'll be exciting for him. Yeah, Gabriel Stutz is in. So, I mean, a lot of these guys played in an earlier game unless they're in the Point, Kucherov, Gensel, Hedman category. One other guy I'm going to mention, I was kind of surprised to see this because the news broke during training camp. But the Lightning signed a forward named Dominic James. Did you see that press release, Greg? Came out maybe a week ago.
I do remember it, yeah. I do remember it, yeah.
So usually, like, the training camp roster is set, and the Lightning signed him. So I was kind of curious, like, what was this? So he was a college player. He's no longer playing college hockey. He's turned pro. He was drafted by Chicago in 2022. So as we've talked about a lot as it related to the Isaac Howard situation, usually if a player is drafted and going to college, there's 4 years before that player can reach UFA status. This happened after 3 years for Dominic James. But I noted that Dominic James was drafted by Chicago basically the year that he turned 20. So he was drafted later. So I actually talked to him today after the skate because he's in the lineup tonight. And he played in Minnesota Duluth. So I said, like, 3 years? He said, yeah, because I was drafted as a 20-year-old, I had 3 years of Chicago holding my rights. And he said, I decided to run out the clock and wait for a better option. So as much as I was kind of on the other side of the coin last year, like, the team that drafted the player, they spent all this time, like, that happened to Chicago, right? But Dominic James is like, I don't want to be in Chicago. So what I said was, Jason Shagabe is the guy the Lightning have drafted, and we've seen him at the development camp in July in Brandon. In fact, this last summer he was there. He plays at Minnesota Duluth. In fact, he just finished his first year. And I asked Dominic James, like, did you get the sense that because the Lightning were following a guy they had drafted, Shagabe, and they saw you, like, how did this come about? And he said, well, actually, my draft year, the Lightning were one of the teams that were talking to me. Now, he was a 6th-round pick, so it's not like the Lightning, like, missed out on this guy. They could have taken him in the first 5 rounds, if they had a pick. They chose not to, but they were interested in him.
Yeah.
And he became available, but he was not available until August. So he basically didn't do anything in terms of like structured camp stuff over the summer. He just worked out on his own. He's from Michigan. So he admitted, like, I'm probably a little bit behind the 8 ball because I didn't have a development camp this particular year. I didn't have a prospect tournament. Chicago was fine letting me run out the clock, but I wasn't going to go to their like structured organizational events. So probably the fact that they had to wait so long and then they had to maybe work out a deal, who knows. He'd signed a 2-year contract, but he is slated to be in Syracuse, I would guess, and he is going to be in the lineup tonight. So that's something that the fans might not know about this new Lightning player within the organization who is going to be in the lineup tonight. So I just wanted to get that out there. So at the skate today, usually the Lightning run lines. They did not run lines at all. So I'm guessing, that's why I said I'm speculating that Hedman and Moser are together and the top line is together. Instead, they basically spent the entire morning skate working on power play. Now, they had 2 units. The second unit was a little bit of a put together based on who's in the lineup. Like Duke was on the second unit. Stahoviak was on the second. Moser, they had Abruzzese and Gauthier. So those are the 5 guys in the second unit. The first unit was the unit, though. The first unit is the Lightning's top unit because these 5 guys are in the lineup tonight.
Yeah.
So you had Kucherov, you had Gensel, you had Point, you had Bjorkstrand, you had Hedman.
And by the way, that makes sense.
Yes.
If you want to try and work on things, have that unit play together.
Yeah, it's not often that in a preseason game you get your top power play unit like as a unit to work on. So they spent a lot of time first 5-on-0. Like they had no penalty killers out on the ice and they were just kind of working their positioning. And then they rotated 2 separate groups of 4 penalty killers. So they actually had to execute with a penalty kill unit out there trying to stop them. So this is what I saw. What we had talked about was kind of their base setup, which is Kucherov at the right circle, Hedman at the point, Gensel, Anthony, our dedicated fan, goal line extended and front of the net, but mostly goal line extended, Bjorkstrand in the bumper, Point at the left circle. That's what we have been talking about, right? But there was a reason why they were working on this. So what I saw was, I wouldn't say that it was like movement. Like when we talk about Edmonton has a very like mobile power play and there are pieces moving all over the place. I wouldn't classify it as that. I would say more shifting. It was almost like, think about a wide receiver running a route. And I'm bringing this up because Kucherov and Hedman basically stayed put. But the other 3 guys, depending on what they wanted to do, shifted. So while Bjorkstrand was in the bumper and Point was at the left circle, they had one sequence where Bjorkstrand shifted to the left, Point slotted to the middle, and Bjorkstrand actually went a little farther down to the lower part of the circle and became open for a seam pass just lower. And Point was in the bumper where he has scored the majority of his power play goals in his NHL career. They had another sequence where Bjorkstrand and Point both shifted to the left. Bjorkstrand almost ran a route, like he looped from the bumper to the top of the left circle and then to the bottom of the circle. Point stayed on the left side, and Gensel went into the bumper. And they basically worked the left side of the ice to set up Gensel for a one-timer from the bumper. So what this says to me is what Kucherov talked about on media day, which is, I want to be on the right. We need a weapon at the left circle who is a righty to set that up as an option. And I don't really like power plays that move. That's basically what he said. You brought up, and Braden Coburn also brought up when he was joining us earlier in the week, that, if you can have some pieces moving, though, it becomes less static. So I think that it's almost like they're trying a little bit of both. So Kucherov is at the right circle. Hedman is at the center point. But the other three guys, depending on what they want to do, may rotate and shift. Now, when the 4 penalty killers were out there, they mostly stayed with that, I'll call it the set formation, with Bjorkstrand in the middle and Point at the left and Gensel at the goal line extended, sometimes moving to the front. And this is something we talked about with Anthony. It's not like Gensel doesn't go to the front of the net. He probably goes to the front of the net a little bit less than Killorn did, who was kind of sort of that guy before he left, right? Which is going back a couple of years. I think Gensel goes less to the front of the net than Killorn, but he does go to the front of the net. Usually, though, he is open for that Kucherov pass to the goal line extended. So I think they're trying, Greg. I think that they understand that, you can't replace Stamkos. So if you're going to have the two righties, Bjorkstrand and Point, you need to get creative in a way to set up guys to be in a position to score. I think that's what they're trying. How will it work? I mean, this is early days, right? They have to kind of work through their reps. Bjorkstrand is new. I know he was with the team last year, but this is a new situation for him, and it's a new unit. So they may go out there tonight against, let's be honest, like the B team for Carolina on the penalty kill, and they may struggle. That's okay. Like, let's get them reps. That's the point. And, if they start the regular season and it's just not clicking, then they have to go back to the drawing board. But early days, and this is the first time I've watched them actually work the power play, because it's usually been like the other sheet, or I'm focused on who's playing in the game that night for my purposes. But this is the first time I really watched them work the power play, and that's what I saw.
And it's pretty.
So I wanted
clear.
to share that with you and the fans.
That's a great analysis, and it's pretty clear they don't want to tinker and make Kucherov uncomfortable moving him around.
I didn't see him on the left at all.
Yeah, and so for me, that makes the most sense. I'm also curious to see, out of that power play, how often do they go back to a Hedman or a Kucherov for shot generation?
Mm-hmm. Well, that was part of it.
Yeah, because I think that can be just as effective. And those guys all can crash the net. I mean, I know Kobe was talking about, that shot from the point, it's so hard to get through. Your job basically is to get it through. And then you hope for the rebound, not necessarily scoring. And that's a fair point. I think they have a lot of guys on that power play unit that can crash the net. They're not your typical power forwards, but Jake Gensel's a great tipper.
Yeah.
And he has the ability to crash the net. I mean, he's just not the biggest guy. And I think Point, for sure, does that. I mean, he'll go hard. So I think there's going to be some opportunities there. And maybe that's part of the movement with 2 or 3 of those players, if they go that route on the left side, is to not only create some momentum, some shots, and some angles where you have a free lane to the net, but it might also open up opportunities when that shot does go through. You have guys in a position to crash the net, because guys are moving around and maybe they're closer and they're able to get a cheap poke, and they're kind of gnats around the goaltender, because you can be distracting that way as well. So I like the fact that their first power play unit is together tonight. Mm-hmm. And it'll be curious to see, partner, how many games they get, because I don't think you want to do that at the expense of having Kucherov play 4 preseason games.
No, I don't think
that might be too many. So, but maybe it's 2.
And if you want the 5-man unit to be a 5-man unit, it's not just Kucherov. They all have to be playing.
100%.
So that is the case tonight. I mean, I'm guessing that they will probably be a unit for one of the Florida games. That would be my expectation. Maybe more than one.
Yeah.
We'll see. It's a priority. So, I mean, this goes to kind of this point of discussion where Kucherov, when he met with the media before training camp started, was like, we didn't get it done on the power play.
Yeah.
They didn't. 2 for 18 against Florida. And they were also 2 for 18 against Florida in the regular season series against the Panthers. So they struggled against the Panthers on the power play.
Do you feel like, because I think we touched on this, but I'm curious seeing that stat and hearing that stat, do you think that was more about Florida than it was Tampa Bay's deficiencies? Or do you feel like they do need to change things up regardless? Because then Kucherov went a step further and said, look, we scored some of these goals on teams that weren't great on the PK.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how much of, like, it's probably both, but what percentage do you say it was a reaction to what they did or didn't do against Florida more so than, yeah, collectively we just felt like we took advantage of some bad PK teams or units rather than anything else?
Well, as I said, Ed Encina did an article and kind of looked at their power play percentage against playoff-bound teams and non-playoff-bound teams. And there was a difference, but it wasn't a huge difference. And I think I mentioned they had a great power play percentage against the Leafs and went a playoff team and went 0-4 against the Leafs. So, doing well in the power play didn't necessarily equate to success in winning games, but we're not really talking about that. We're just talking about, like, how did the power play do? I think the power play was searching. The top unit was searching last year to figure out a way to get something solid in place in the absence of Stamkos. That is still ongoing, and that is why this is a priority in camp. I would call it a priority. If they've spent a lot of time in the power play already, but if they spend a whole morning skate
right,
working on the power play with this 5-man unit, like, they're not going to have the same unit as they had when they had Stamkos, but I think they'd like a unit, barring some injury, where they can send the same 5 guys out there. We didn't see that last year. We saw different guys, different spots. Hagel was out there, Chafee was out there, Radish was out there.
Would you say, outside of health, partner, that is the biggest question mark for the Lightning heading into the season is the power play? And I say that because they were great last year number-wise.
The most important question. Yeah, I don't know if it's the most important question. A good power play is important, but you can be a good team with an okay power play. I have a hard time believing that this power play will be worse than okay. And it's probably going to be quite good, because even when they were kind of searching last year, they were the 5th best in the league in terms of their percentage. So I guess I wouldn't say it's the biggest question, because I still go back to, like, success in the standings is more tied to success defensively. And I think if you defend well, with or without a top power play, it is more predictive of success in the standings. That's why I have a hard time saying it's the biggest question. I think it's a work in progress, and I think it's a priority.
Well, the question becomes too: did the power play, was that the biggest reason they fell to the Panthers, or did we just feel like the Panthers were the better team? And the reason why I
think 2 for 18 hurt. And let's say they'd gone 6 for 18, that would have helped a lot.
Yeah.
But, the Panthers were just...
They were just moving. They were a machine.
They played at a championship level, and that includes their penalty kill, but it wasn't only their penalty kill.
That's a fair point. It is a fair point. I am curious, though, because of who spoke about it, meaning Kucherov, if it is something that is, at least for him, not that he takes it personal, but like, hey, I want us to be consistently good against everybody this year on the power play. And if we do that, it gives ourselves a better chance to win in the postseason. Let's put it that way.
Well, for Cooch, the power play is his baby. Like,
it is his baby.
It is. He still led the league in scoring last year, But, like, for Kucherov, and I'm not saying he's a me, like, he wants the team to do well, but the power play is way more on Kucherov's radar than the penalty kill. He's not playing on penalty kill. Penalty kill is very important, though. So, the coaching staff has to weigh all of this, right? It's all important to the coaching staff.
I'm curious what our audience says.
So we'll see.
Radio. Yeah. Get in on the conversation.
They're not going to be doing it in practice tonight.
No.
They're going to be taking on, an opposing penalty kill, trying to stop them. And let's see how they look. But there is no question, Greg, they have weapons. They have excellent weapons on this 5-man
I agree
unit.
with you. I agree.
So the question is, can they get in sync to the point that they are getting the puck to these weapons in a spot where they can do damage? If you get the puck to Oliver Bjorkstrand in the slot where he has a chance to get a shot off, that is a weapon. The same for Braden Point if Braden Point is in the middle. If you give Kucherov an opportunity to deliver a seam pass to somebody who's waiting on the other side of the ice and that pass gets through, there's enough talent there that the puck probably is going in the net. So they're already way ahead of the game as compared to most other teams based on the talent that they can throw out there. Now it's just a matter of kind of finding a setup / formation. I don't mean formation like, this is it, because clearly they're looking at having some different looks, but settling into kind of reps, depending on what the penalty kill team is doing, that can allow them to have success. And keep in mind, the best power plays are failing 7 out of 10 times, if not more.
You're a Hall of Famer in baseball.
Yeah.
You do that, right? So, interesting. From Dio, I am saying that correctly, Dio, not Bio, from Dio on YouTube. Everyone talking about Vasi makes me uneasy. It's like talking about your offensive line in football. Well, look, in a lot of instances, I mean, you could say quarterback's the most important position in the NFL to a large degree. That is true. However, if you do not have an offensive line that can protect and run block, usually those go hand in hand. And oftentimes a great offensive line can overcome even an average quarterback. I mean, we kind of seen that. If you do not have a great goaltender, for the most part, it is hard to go all the way. Now, exceptions to every rule, partner, we've seen it over the last probably 5 to 10 years, maybe even more so. But I still maintain that. And so when people are holding their breath because there could be some injury issues with Andrei Vasilevsky, I'm okay with that because he's that darn good.
Yeah.
And he means that much to the team. I mean, that part of what makes the Lightning who they are and why we think every year they are a contender for the cup, at least to get into the playoffs for sure, is because of the guy they have in net. Let's not be misguided about this. Do you think this team, with a full year of Jonas Johansson, gets into the playoffs? Maybe. I don't know. But I feel a full year of Andrei Vasilevsky in net, you're darn right. And, a cup contender. There were people who were picking the Lightning to beat the Panthers last year before that series started. Now, obviously the Panthers proved them wrong, but a big reason was because of who you have in net.
Mm-hmm.
That's why. Every year he gives you an opportunity to sit at the table and have those conversations, not feel out of place about the Tampa Bay Lightning being a team that you have to be aware of. So, yeah. It is like talking about the offensive line. Might even be more so. So keep that all in mind here. Bailey on YouTube says, so glad that hockey's back, and you don't know how good it feels to hear Dave on the call again. Go Bolts.
Well, thank you. Was it Bailey? Is that who it was?
Yes.
Thank you, Bailey. You never know how many people are actually listening when we roll into Carolina. It's like, do people know there's a game tonight? Do they know how to find us on the radio or on the stream? But they do. The social media aspect also helps. We're promoting it. We're putting the highlights on.
So
thank you, Bailey.
Steve just sent me a text, partner, and we got this from FKA322 on YouTube. He said, sorry if you already mentioned it, but what happened between Hagel and Schmidt in practice? And then Steve just sent from Eric
they got into a dust-up. That was after I'd left.
Yeah.
It happens sometimes.
There was a slash, I guess.
Yeah, sometimes you get fights in practice. You do.
Now, look,
both
I don't want Hagel
in training
fighting.
camp
I know.
And in the regular season. Well,
I don't want fight.
Hagel's a fiery guy. That's one of the reasons.
I get
one
that.
of the many reasons we love watching him compete.
I get that, and a lot of people will say we like that, and we like Schmidt. I mean, and I didn't see the fight, so I'm sure maybe somebody will have footage of it, and we'll take a look
and then
at
it sounds like it was over and done with once it was over and done.
But I mean, it's always one of those things you hold your breath a little bit. I mean, you just do because guys are feisty. We know Hagel and some of the off-season comments he had, regarding the Panthers and things like that, and at some point maybe that's going to happen this year. But in a meaningless situation, you do not want anybody to be injured in something like that for sure. So it does happen though. And it probably happened a lot more 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, let's be pretty clear on that. Brandon on YouTube. Let's see here. Let me open up my text there. Says, watching the power play all season long last year, it seemed like the set plays were too predictable. They just need to break out of their comfort zone to mix up the opposition.
Well, look, I don't think the power play was as automatic in terms of like what we saw as when they had Stamkos. But look, this is just stating the obvious. We're saying it again and again and again. Like, if you pull a huge weapon off that unit, you have to go back to the drawing board. And I think they were like the top power play was a work in progress for most of last year. I wouldn't say all of last year, because, they were integrating Bjorkstrand before he got, compartment syndrome. They were integrating him into the bumper. Like, they were still mixing things up. I think my hope is, and your hope is, and the hope for the fans is, and certainly it's Jeff Halpern's hope, that they can find a 5-man unit that kind of settles in, and that's the unit. That's ideal.
Yeah.
But if it's not working to your satisfaction, you're going to tinker. And I think that's what they did last year. They didn't rehaul it, but they definitely tinkered. They were trying to find another way to get to where they wanted to get. And the fact that they finished 5th is quite remarkable,
Yeah.
given the fact that they were tinkering with it for much of the year.
It's a good point.
Here's another example for this upcoming year for another team. What are the Toronto Maple Leafs going to do without Mitch Marner? Mitch Marner is such a even more than Stamkos, because Marner played penalty kill too. So, and played a lot. Yes, there was one point, I think 2 years ago, where he missed some time with injury, but he has been very durable for them. And in some ways, if not the centerpiece, a key piece in everything they did. Now you're removing that guy. How do you go forward? You do go forward, but you have to do things a different way. And what's that going to look like for Toronto? I think Craig Berube's an excellent coach. They'll figure out something, but you can't just say goodbye to somebody who's a huge integral piece, particularly on the special teams, and at a skill level that you just can't replace. You have to find another way to accomplish the same thing. It's a challenge. So
there was nothing. Few things in sports are automatic. Getting back to the set plays, few things are automatic in sports. Kareem's skyhook, Jordan's fadeaway, Ovechkin's one-timer.
Mm-hmm.
Those things.
Stamkos is a one-timer.
That's what I was getting at, though.
Yeah.
It was a very rare thing to have on your team, something that wasn't a slam dunk because you don't score. How many times did Stammer miss the net or the goaltender got him? But you don't score how many goals he scored on the power play without it being somewhat of a threat. Dave,
Mm-hmm.
is it okay for me to say, look, Stamkos is, on average, what's his goal total? 45 goal scorer per year, maybe a little less than that, depending on where he is. Is it safe to say 15 of those maybe are coming from the power play?
Yeah, he scored 14 power play goals last year for Nashville, and was, not a
there
great
you
year
go.
for Nashville, but yes,
Right. There you go.
He still reached double digit and into the teens.
So for at least Stamkos, you could sit there and say a third of my goals are going to come on the power play. So, again, it's not a slam dunk, but it's in the confines of talking about hockey. That's a pretty good stat to look at and say, yeah, that's every couple of games you might make a case if the Lightning are on the power play, Stamkos may get one. That's hard to say. You take that out of the lineup. Yeah, they're still an extremely talented team, but you're gonna have to find some ways to to manufacture some goals. And to your point, we're going to see some of that hopefully tonight, that process, because there's no question they still have tons of skill on that unit. I mean, you have every one of those forwards, Dave, is at least a 20-goal scorer.
Yeah.
Every one of them. And you can make the case 30-goal scorers. I mean, Bjorkstrand I don't think has gotten there yet, but I think on this team he may have the opportunity to.
And I guess I would differ a little bit from what the fan said when the fan mentioned set plays. So going back to the Stamkos days, yes, the players were set, but Kucherov had lots of options. So it wasn't like Kucherov was saying, I'm going across to Stamkos come hell or high water. He's like, what's open, right? I mean, I guess it's a little bit like a quarterback in the pocket, has 3-4 options to go downfield, right? And maybe that is a set play, but to me, it's not quite a set play because it's reading and reacting to what's available, right? And most teams do use a power play that has some kind of structure to it. Even the ones that are mobile. I mean, the players tend to go to where they are going to have success, right? So I don't think what the Lightning are doing is, I mean, maybe there's with Kuch, because he's such a special player, they prefer to have the players be less mobile, but I don't think it's that much different from how a lot of teams like to set up on the power play. They have their players at certain spots. Part of that is, your righties and your lefties. You want your righties to be in a position to shoot quickly. You want your lefties to be in a position to shoot quickly. Therefore, where they are on the ice matters. So, anyway, I'm glad we're having such a long discussion about the power play, though, because it's interesting. It's interesting to talk about and think about. And
People want to know.
Yeah.
People want to know. David on YouTube says, could McDonough get a long-term contract? Considering Marchand signed until he's 43, it seems like a way to get the AAV down, and the player will likely not play out the full duration of the contract.
That's a Julian Brisebois question. I don't know if the Lightning have an appetite for a long-term deal for a player, let's say, in his mid to late 30s, but they'll work with McDonough and McDonough's agent to come up with something that makes sense. I mean, what helps them is that, McDonough really wants to be here, and the Lightning want McDonough here. So maybe this is pie in the sky after what happened with Stamkos, because I really felt Stamkos would re-sign with the Lightning. It didn't happen, but I feel that they're going to get a deal done. Whether it's going to be like a Marchand deal, I have no idea. The Lightning haven't really done a lot of those, though, honestly. I mean, I'm trying to think, like Callahan's deal was maybe a 5 or 6 year deal.
Yeah, I think you're right.
He might have been in his early 30s when he got that deal. We'll see. But we're not going to see until next offseason.
So
Julian made that clear.
Julian seems like, from what we've seen, he sticks to his guns on what he thinks is a fair offer and what's not. He also seems to be somebody who's pretty analytical when it comes to, after a certain threshold, the amount of games you've played and maybe the age, not being handicapped when it comes to contracts that might not be beneficial. There's nothing worse in sports than being tied to a bad contract. Particularly what we've seen over the last few years when the cap really didn't go up. But I think I would be surprised if they did something like that.
Yeah, we had a fan just remind us. Thank you, Steve David. Remind us, Gord just signed an extension until he's 39. I will point out, though, that Yanni is 33, turning 34. McDonough is 36. Like a Marchand deal is well into your 40s. To me, that is different than 39. But we'll see.
I think for me, once you get to a certain point, whether it's games played, what type of style you've played, and your age, and obviously the cap, I think once you start to get into that 34, 35, 36, and it might even be a little younger than that, especially if you're not considered a star player, I would be very hard-pressed to give you term. And I understand it's a way, like if you really want somebody, and, like Barclay Goodrow might be a good example. You look at Barclay Goodrow and say, look, I really like that guy. I think he can help us win a championship, particularly right now. But I know his age. I know what he brings and what he doesn't bring. Does a 5-year deal at $15 million, does that help us? Because maybe you're going to get 1 or 2 good years, and those last 3, you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I do to handle this or do it differently? So I think when you get to a certain age, you almost have to look at it like that, because you can't be in a position to have a couple of really bad contracts. I just, especially in a cap era, I don't think that's wise. Julian strikes me as a guy who also understands that.
I actually don't know enough of these contracts that are out there to say this without some doubt. So the fans out there are like, you're wrong. There are contracts out there like this. But, I mean, it is hard to have the AAV be a lot lower than the dollar amount.
Yeah.
They kind of tried to tweak that after the original new CBA coming out of the 04-05 lockout. And that was one reason why we had a work stoppage in 12-13, is that teams were giving out like 15-year contracts, and the money was dropping down precipitously toward the end. So the AAV would be lower, which is really what affects your cap number, than the dollar amount. So what we got out of the 12-13 work stoppage was shorter contracts, and you could only have the money drop by a percentage. And I don't remember exactly what that percentage was. And now with this new CBA, it's even shorter. So you can only sign a player, and that's if you hold the rights to that player is 7 years. If it's a player from another organization, it's maximum 6. So how much is the money going to drop? Because that's how you get the AAV lower than the salary. At the end of the contract, you're dropping the salary. So your AAV is lower. I'm not sure that we really see that as much anymore. I mean, maybe a little bit, but I think the league has kind of put in place some guardrails to prevent teams from doing what the fan suggested the Lightning might look to do with McDonough, and kind of the ideas with Marchand too. The other thing too is, like, let's say, I'm not going to use Marchand as an example, but let's just say a player has signed a contract and the expectation is the player is not going to finish out the contract. Well, the players who choose to retire, if the player chooses to retire, then they don't get the money. But most players are going to be like, I want the money. So, they are going to go on the injured list. I mean, the Brent Seabrook contract's a great example. Seabrook couldn't play the last 3 years of that contract. The Lightning agreed to take it on, in exchange for what that would think was the Tyler Johnson trade, maybe, because they, if I'm remembering right, the Hawks took, Johnson's contract, or I may not be remembering that right, but they got the Seabrook contract, which, they had to pay him for 3 years. He was on long-term injury, so it didn't affect their cap number, but that's what players do. So I'm not sure that there is a huge benefit, unless you just really want the player. Like the Panthers really wanted Marchand back, so they're like, we're going to give you a contract till you're 43 or whatever. If you don't finish it, fine, but we want you back, and this will ensure that you're going to come back. So I don't think the Lightning are really in that boat with McDonough. I just think it's a different situation.
Look, the other thing,
he's going to be 37 when the contract is up.
And so you have to be cognizant of term, and you have to be cognizant of, can he still play? Because, again, it gets back to, once a player hits whatever age that is, partner, 34 or 35, the Ryan McDonoughs, the Sidney Crosbys, guys who are in their late 30s who are still performing at a very high level, I feel like that's not the norm. You're going to see a drop-off in play. I mean, heck, they're having those conversations in Pittsburgh with Malkin and Letang. Yeah. Those guys are in their 30s, approaching 40. And just go down the list. I mean, it's in part one of the reasons they moved on from Stamkos, although they wanted him, but they wanted him at a price. And they wanted him at a price because I think they also knew, looking at metrics and looking at the player, you're a really good player still, but we can't afford. You're not an $11 million player anymore, or a 7, in their eyes, And I think that's how you have to approach things. Ryan McDonough has been fantastic. It does not look like his play is dipping anytime soon.
No,
but Father Time hits us all, and eventually it will hit him. And you just don't want to be in a situation where you're dealing with a bad contract on top of all of a sudden now the play has suffered. It's a fine line. I understand that. Boy, what a cliche that is. It's a fine line. What does that mean? It really does. It really does come down to that. I want to get to a couple more questions here, partner.
By the way, Steve sent us some text. Follow-up from Bailey. Bailey's blind. I always listen to Dave on the radio. Thank you, Bailey, again. And Dio says, listens on the Lightning app. Yeah, things have changed since our childhood, Greg, when, if you want to listen to a game on the radio or watch a game on TV, you basically had to be in the market. And the farther you got from that market, it became more difficult.
Go and listen to it.
Right. Like the signal would drop and, you may be out of range to get the game on TV. Nowadays, like the Lightning went to Stockholm in 2019. We could have people there tune in.
That's the beauty. There is a beauty to listening to a game. There just is, because you could be anywhere. You could be in your bed just listening to a game. You could be out doing errands. You could just be whatever. There's and I think it's because you have to use your imagination a little bit too. You see the on TV, you can see it obviously visually, and there's a component to it, but you're kind of telling a story when you're listening to it on radio. At least I always felt like, because you're detailing things a little bit more, maybe a lot more. This was in response to Ed Encina's tweet about an hour ago regarding the Hagel and Schmidt fight. Bolts fan Syracuse said, okay, can someone explain why Schmidt would do that if he wants a spot on the roster?
That may be exactly why.
And I think that's that he's trying to, not back down.
So Brian dropped, unfortunately. We had him on yesterday. He had phone problems. But we led off with a question about Roman Schmidt and how he is playing tough. Now, I only saw him for however many minutes in the Nashville game. Brian called 3 of those prospect games where Schmidt played regularly and played a lot and was involved. I think he got into some scuffles and was looking to do a lot of the stuff that he did in the Nashville game and, frankly, that he did to Hagel. So there's nothing wrong with a player who does that. They toe the line. That's his game, clearly. But, I'm speaking a little bit from the perspective of somebody who hasn't watched him play a lot, Brian saw more of him than I did. So that's why we asked the question. Unfortunately, he had phone problems. So we never really got a full answer from him.
Yeah.
But I think for Roman Schmidt, he's like, this has to be part of my game. Like Luke Shen evolved into, from a top 5 overall pick, like modified his game where he's like, I'm going to play really good D. I'm going to make the smart, simple play. I'm going to be extremely reliable. I'm going to be tough as nails. And if you come anywhere near my goalie, you are going to be saying hello to me. That's like he punched guys in the face, but, it was not pleasant to have to go into the low slot, near the goalie when Luke Shen was out there. That was part of what made him an NHL defenseman and still makes him an NHL defenseman. So if you're a younger guy, it's like, Roman Schmidt, okay, I'm a right-handed defenseman. It's like a left-handed pitcher in baseball. Like, these are coveted players. He is big, he is strong, and he's playing mean. And if he's like, I'm going to play mean in a game, I'm going to play mean in a scrimmage, I'm going to play mean in a practice, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, I don't. Phil would say the extra stuff he has a problem with. After the whistle and guys are cross-check. And I don't know how this came about.
Yeah, it might have been in the context of a drill. Yeah.
It might have been in context of a drill. And I think if that is part of his game, you don't have a problem with a young guy incorporating that into drills, into scrimmages. You don't. Because, he's he's going to be doing that in a game. You would think. You just don't want it to come at the expense of one of your star players. And I get that. I think that's and beggars can't be choosers. Do we think Luke Shen would take a run at Kucherov in a drill?
No.
I don't think he would. And I'm not comparing Schmidt and Hagel to Shen and Kucherov, but you understand somewhat the comparison. I mean, Hagel's a big part of what they want to do.
Yeah.
Speaking of Luke Shen, by the way, do you think there's been another player who has really turned his career around in the NHL more than Luke Shen? He went from a guy that was put on waivers, right, by the Ducks, to somebody who is coveted. Coveted.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember my dad calling me a couple years ago, and Luke Shen was, and I think he was traded to Pittsburgh and then traded
they moved
again.
him. It was last year. They moved him to Winnipeg.
But I can remember, before, he's saying, this Luke Shen, I mean, Penguins would love to have a guy like that. He's tough. He'll drop the... But, he went from somebody, partner, who really turned his career around to the point where other people were like, yeah, I'll give up a third-round pick for Luke Shen.
Yeah.
I mean, kudos to him. Because he had a second career. He went from being a top 4 guy, and then I don't know if the game caught up to him in terms of he had to adjust to the speed of the game and certain things like that, but he turned himself into a guy who every team wanted.
Yep.
And that's a credit to him. Just goes to show you a little bit too, hard work, figuring that out, being a pro. I can appreciate that. Bolts fan Syracuse also said, guys, so excited to have you both back. Excited to see Crozier and Lilly play together tonight, hopefully. Crozier is very good on the PK, and I would love to see him get some time there opposite Hedman. Moser didn't have the same pop after his return from injury. I'll be interested to see if he stays in the top 4 this year long term, especially if there is progression of some of the younger players. So I think those are kind of a couple of different questions.
Yes.
I think, do people want to see Crozier and Lilleberg together this year? It makes sense because they've had success before doing it, and a lot of people feel like you're not asking them to be top 4 defensemen. If they're your bottom pairing and they're 2 young players playing together, man, you feel really good about the future and in the present. We don't know if that's going to happen. We're speculating. I think the Moser question is, a lot of people felt like when he came back from his injury that the standard wasn't the same. When he was healthy the first half of the year, he was very good.
Yes.
And, talking about age and where he is in the prime of his career, you feel like that's a good fit for the Lightning. That doesn't mean competition doesn't knock one of the top 4 eventually out and somebody can slot back in. But I think the Lightning have every intention of having J.J. Moser be a part of not only today, but tomorrow as well. And things can change. I think everybody's interested to see how he bounces back for the full season. Hopefully he stays healthy.
Yeah.
But you can also be equally excited about the 2 young defensemen she just mentioned.
Yeah, and so beyond Hedman and Moser, you do have Crozier and Lilleberg in the lineup tonight, and you have Max Groshev and Simon Lundmark. Lightning signed him. He's a former second-round pick of the Winnipeg Jets, has never played in the NHL. He's been in their minor league system, basically their AHL team, for the last 4 years. So in the game at Carolina, Lilleberg and Lundmark were partners. So it is possible that they will keep them together and play Crozier with Groshev, who may or may not have played together in Syracuse. Actually, Bolts fan Syracuse would probably know this better than you or me, whether they were ever partners last year after Groshev was moved on D. But I would think that Bolts fan Syracuse's hunch is probably correct, that Crozier and Lilleberg will be a pair that would put Lundmark and Groshev as a pair as well. Assuming Moser is with Hedman. Again, they didn't run the lines in the D pairs this morning.
I mean, partner, here's the other thing that you don't anticipate, but maybe it does happen. Weird, crazier things have occurred. Maybe one of those younger players end up playing with Hedman.
Yeah, it could be.
Just you see the development, and you're like, I like what I'm seeing from him. Man, what could he look like playing with Hedman? And, does Moser go down?
You mean for tonight?
Well, I'm saying in general, throughout the year. If you find out one of these younger guys is playing well, and you're like, I think we can give him more, and maybe one of the veterans is not playing well, and you want to see how somebody interacts with a headman. Maybe it does. I mean, that's how these things happen.
Yeah.
Somebody takes advantage of an opportunity. So, and we took another question here from Bolts fan. Bolts fan Benny on YouTube says, what have the Bolts done to improve their third D pair? I think the potential of having Crozier-Lilleberg is the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you feel like there's a lot of upside with those players, the floor is higher, but the ceiling is higher, too.
I mean,
that's how I look at it.
They didn't really make kind of like, what have they done? They had a fairly quiet offseason. The two main guys that they added were both forwards, talking about Pontus Holmberg and Peltier, in that they got them as unrestricted free agents after their teams failed to qualify them. Really, the choice that they made on D was to let Perbix go and not re-sign him and basically elevate Crozier. But I think the way I would answer that question is like development and growth, right? So development and growth for Lilleberg, development and growth for Crozier, development and growth for Moser,
Right.
who's not in his first year with the Lightning. He's still a young guy. Like, he's in his mid-20s. So, I mean, Moser's not in the bottom pair. Bolts fan Benny was asking about the bottom pair. But I think that's how I would look at it. Just the natural evolution of players gaining more experience and developing their overall game. But it wasn't like the Lightning went out and acquired a defenseman to supplement the bottom pair.
She also says Carlisle and Crozier spent most of their time together last year when they were healthy.
Okay.
I mean,
and they were actually together at practice yesterday.
Yeah.
When they had the 8D
right
on the sheet with the NHLers.
I think people just have it in their mind when they initially came up, Lilleberg and Crozier gelled. I think a lot of people look at Crozier as maybe having the most upside out of those three defensemen.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's maybe some of that. Do you have, because they've played together initially, the Lilleberg-Crozier connection? But she brings up a fair point about Carlisle. I don't know where Carlisle ranks in the pecking order of the defensemen. I think somewhere it's Crozier-Lilleberg or Lilleberg-Crozier, then Carlisle. But I could be wrong. And I know they play different positions. I'm just saying in terms of, like, where do they view them as prospects? I mean, clearly Lilleberg is somebody they've given a lot of games to at the NHL level initially here. I think Crozier's been knocking on the door, but you feel like he's been blocked a little bit more than somebody else. But I think it's a fair point. You want competition, though, and it goes back to the question about the third pair D. Like, what have they done to improve it? That's coming internally. And that's what you want to see. Those guys push each other. And look, Radish is going to be part of that, too. He's in the mix.
Yep, of course.
And he's a guy who can be a point producer to a degree with his shot. And maybe for him, the next step is not only to continue being sound defensively, but if your bread and butter is some offense, what can he do to increase that number a little bit? Because he can have a weapon back there. So, some things to keep an eye on. We're going to watch it all unfold tonight. Lightning and Kane, 7 o'clock start, partner, which means we'll be on the air at 6:30.
Yep.
And is Phil doing the game tonight?
Yep.
Yes. Phil Esposito will be there.
Phil is not with us on Saturday.
No, that's okay. But we'll see him tonight.
Yes.
And then I will have the last call presented by Jack Daniels.
Yeah,
with
you got
Bobby
a
the Chief
whole
Taylor,
round table again.
Brian Engblom.
Again, because that's how you're doing your pregame and
Yeah.
intermission.
And no excuse for Brian in the connection because he'll be right next to me. And we'll kind of go from there.
Speak up.
Yeah, that's right. But partner, this was a fun week.
Yeah.
First full week we got in the flow, and then next week, I mean, we'll probably have more cuts, right, to talk about.
Yeah, by the time we do our next show on Monday, I expect the Lightning's roster will be down from wherever they are in the 50s, 50 some odd, to probably low 30s, high 20s.
Yep. So that'll be fun. We'll have those things to talk about. And, of course, our audience who participates all the time, we appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for all the questions, everyone.
It was great. Keep it going. Tell all your friends, too. Listen. And we'll get it going again on Monday. Partner, I'll see you tonight at the rink. Great job.
See you tonight.
Dave Mishkin right there. Thanks to Steve Ersnick and Jared Johnson for producing and engineering. We always appreciate them. Everybody out there who's been listening and participating, appreciate you guys. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.